All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into Joker,
Okay.
but not just the movie itself.
Right.
We're going like full-on academic here. We've got some serious analysis to unpack. Think like Blinkist for film buffs.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. The analysis goes way deeper than your typical superhero movie breakdown. It looks at Joker as this social commentary, really dissects Arthur Fleck as a character, and even connects it back to the whole Batman universe.
And we start off right in the thick of it in Gotham City.
Mm.
And it's 1981 in the film, but there's this like timeless grime to it all, you know?
Yeah.
Like it could be any city, any era, struggling with just total urban decay.
Yeah, the analysis actually uses some pretty vivid descriptions, like overflowing garbage. They even mention like super rats.
Oh, wow.
And just this constant feeling of like danger lurking around every corner. It's almost like the city itself is another character,
Yeah.
mirroring Arthur Fleck's mental state.
And the film really uses those visuals to make you feel that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's dark, it's cramped. There are all of these close-ups.
Unsettling close-ups a lot of the time.
You really feel the weight of Gotham pressing down on you.
Yeah, and it's in this environment that we meet Arthur Fleck. He's just trying to survive, battling mental illness while trying to make a life for himself in this city that's falling apart around him. He's got this dream of being a stand-up comedian, but the reality is, a dead-end job as a clown, and he's totally reliant on social services that are clearly failing him.
And obviously, we can't talk about Joker without talking about the laughter.
Of course.
But it's not just like a character quirk, right?
Right.
The film uses it as a symptom of his trauma, his potential mental illness.
Exactly. And the analysis points out how effective that is. It's unsettling. It's painful to watch sometimes. And it makes you think about how we perceive mental illness and where that line is between empathy and, maybe harmful stereotypes.
It's interesting how all of Arthur's relationships are affected by his view of the world, which is clearly distorted, especially his relationship with his mother, Penny. I mean, he's fixated on Thomas Wayne.
Completely, like obsessed with this idea that he's going to come and rescue them. And this delusion that she has, it fuels Arthur's search for identity and belonging. It gives him this hope, but then it all just shatters when he finds out the truth about his mother and his own past, which is pretty traumatic.
And then there's Sophie, Arthur's neighbor.
Right.
It seems like they're connecting, but then we get this reveal, and it's just devastating.
Oh, it's brutal. It's one of the most heartbreaking moments in the film. We realize that this whole relationship, it was all in Arthur's head. And it just drives home his mental state, how lonely he is, how he can't tell what's real from what's not.
It's a real gut punch for the audience, too,
Oh.
because you get pulled into that belief with him.
Totally.
And then it all leads up to that scene on the subway. Everything changes after that.
The analysis calls it a turning point. Arthur, who's always been the victim, commits this horrifying act of violence. It's so disturbing, but it's also portrayed as this twisted empowerment for him. And that act sets the stage for the whole kill the rich movement that erupts in Gotham.
Wait, so you're saying people are inspired by this? Like they start wearing clown masks and targeting the wealthy elite?
That's exactly what happens. It's like they see him as the symbol of rebellion.
Wow.
But the analysis also questions how deeply the film actually explores that connection, Like maybe it's oversimplifying things a bit, reducing these complex social movements to just a reaction to a single act of violence.
So the film's trying to say something about class inequality and the actions of people who feel like they've been pushed aside.
Right.
But it might not be doing it in a very nuanced way.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It raises some interesting points about individual acts of violence and social change, but it doesn't necessarily provide the answers. And then, of course, you have Arthur's appearance on the Murray Franklin show.
Right, that's where he really becomes the Joker.
Exactly. It's like this symbolic confrontation with society itself, and it all plays out on live television.
And this scene, it's intense.
Oh, it's masterfully done. Arthur confronts Murray, accuses him, and by extension society, of ignoring people like him, dehumanizing them, basically creating people like him. And then it culminates in this shocking act of violence. He completes his transformation into the Joker.
So even though the film might not perfectly explore all the social issues, it's making a point about ignoring people who are struggling, who feel invisible.
Absolutely. It's this stark reminder that neglecting people can have unintended consequences, and those consequences can be tragic.
Definitely.
And it's within all of this, the social commentary, the psychological exploration, that the film weaves in these subtle connections to the Batman mythos.
Right. We can't forget about Thomas and Bruce Wayne.
I
It's
know.
like the film is subtly rewriting the Batman origin story.
Yeah, and it gives us a glimpse into the events that'll shape Bruce Wayne into the hero we know. But it's not the traditional tragic portrayal of Bruce Wayne's parents' deaths that we're used to.
Yeah.
Young Bruce is almost just an observer here, like
Yeah.
a child seemingly untouched by all the chaos going on around him. And it makes you wonder how this version of Bruce could ever actually become Batman.
Almost like it's making us rethink the origin story, asking if this Joker, driven by this personal pain and resentment, could even be a true enemy for Batman.
Yeah. Is this Arthur Fleck, this broken, vengeful man, capable of being the intellectual, mastermind that we usually associate with the Joker? It's a good question.
So it's more than just a superhero movie, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's this complex look at society, a character study, and it's visually stunning. It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about.
It demands your attention, challenges your assumptions, and leaves you thinking about that line between victim and villain. It's blurry. And in part 2, we'll go even deeper into Arthur Fleck's psychology and those connections to Batman.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Joker.
So we're going to shift gears a bit now and really focus on the psychological stuff going on in the film and how that ties in with the social commentary.
It's one of the things that makes the film so effective, right? It gets
Yeah.
under your skin and makes you think about how we as a society treat people dealing with mental illness and the consequences of that.
Yeah, definitely. And the analysis really digs into how the film portrays Arthur's isolation. You see him constantly trying to connect with people, but it never really works out for him.
Like right from the start with his social worker, it's obvious she's overwhelmed, the system's failing him, and he's basically on his own. And then even that gets taken away when his therapy sessions are cut.
It's like his last lifeline is cut.
Yeah.
And he's just spiraling further and further away from anything resembling a normal life. It's heavy stuff.
That scene in his apartment after he loses his therapy is so powerful. He's dancing, but it's almost desperate, like he's trying to escape his own head.
Yeah, it's a really visual representation of what's going on inside. There's no escape for him. It's pretty heartbreaking.
So how does the film connect this isolation to him becoming the Joker?
The analysis suggests that his turn to violence is partly a reaction to how apathetic the world is toward him. He's been ignored, treated like he's nothing for so long that when he lashes out on the subway, as horrible as it is, it's like this twisted kind of empowerment for him.
So for once he feels seen, he feels in control.
In a way, yeah. And then the film takes that even further by linking his actions to this kill the rich movement.
Right.
The analysis dives into how the film portrays the movement as a direct response to what Arthur did, but it also points out that it might be a bit too simple. Social movements are way more complex than that.
So we see how Arthur, pushed to the edge, becomes this symbol, but the film maybe misses some of the nuances of how these movements really happen.
Exactly. It wants to show the consequences of how society treats people, but might be simplifying the bigger picture a bit.
It definitely raises some questions.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us with Arthur as a character? Is he a victim? Or is he responsible for what he does?
That's the thing. It's what makes the film so interesting and maybe frustrating. It doesn't give you easy answers. It doesn't let you just categorize him as good or bad. You have to sit with the gray areas.
Yeah, it makes you uncomfortable, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
You keep thinking about Arthur and what he goes through.
Absolutely. And you wonder, could things have gone differently
Right.
if he hadn't been failed by everyone around him?
It's a tough question.
It is. Joker makes us think about how we treat people who are different, people who are struggling. Makes you think about if we're part of the problem.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is, but I think that's why it's so powerful. It's not just entertainment, it's holding up a mirror to society.
Totally agree. So we've got this social commentary, this psychological study, but we also have to talk about how the film uses those classic Batman elements.
Right. We see Thomas and Bruce Wayne throughout the film, and it's almost like a new take on the Batman origin story. But the film focuses on Bruce way less than you'd expect.
Mhm.
It's not about his trauma, really. He's more like a bystander to everything that happens, and it makes you wonder if this Bruce could even become Batman.
Almost like a challenge to the classic origin story, right?
Yeah, and it makes you question if this Joker, who's all about his own pain and not some big master plan, could really be a threat to Batman.
So more than just if he could physically fight Batman. Could he be the mastermind that we expect from the Joker?
Exactly. It's really interesting. And it all ties back to that question we talked about before. Does Arthur actually win in the end? Or is becoming the Joker a defeat? He's started this movement, but he's lost everything. who he was, his sanity.
It's a hollow victory if it is one. You get this feeling of sadness, like something's been lost.
And that's what the film does so well. It goes into these murky parts of the human experience and makes you question everything you thought you knew about good and evil. It's a really complex character.
He's both a product of his environment and responsible for his own choices.
Exactly. It's powerful stuff. And in the last part, we're going to look at how the filmmakers actually brought this to life on screen.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Joker. We've covered a lot of ground. Gotham, Arthur's psychology, the film's message about society.
And now we get to talk about how they actually made it all come together on screen, all those cinematic choices that make it so effective. The source material goes into a lot of detail about how the film creates this really specific atmosphere,
Yeah, it's not just about the story, right?
Right.
The way it looks, the way it sounds. Gotham feels like this character, this force that weighs down on you, almost like it's reflecting Arthur's struggles.
And the analysis talks about the cinematography, how Lawrence Sher uses all these close-ups on Arthur's face, like
Yeah.
you're right there with him, experiencing everything he's going through.
And the colors are so bleak.
Yeah.
Everything's these washed out greens and browns. Like the city itself is decaying.
It adds to that whole feeling of hopelessness.
You can practically feel the grime.
Definitely. And the way they frame the shots is interesting, too. Arthur's always boxed in, whether it's by the buildings or crowds of people, or even just the way the camera frames him in his apartment.
Yeah, it's like he can't escape.
Exactly. And then you've got the music, which adds this whole other level of, unease to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not your typical superhero score.
No, it's much more atmospheric, unsettling. The analysis mentions Hildegard Guðadóttir's work specifically, how she uses these dissonant strings and electronic elements to create this constant tension.
There's that scene where he's walking down the hallway, I think after he's done something really awful.
Yeah.
And the music is like this slow, distorted waltz that just keeps building and building. It's terrifying.
It really gets under your skin,
Oh,
You're not
yeah.
just watching it, you're feeling it.
And of course, we have to talk about Joaquin Phoenix. I mean, his performance is just amazing.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis calls it unsettling and empathetic, which I think sums it up perfectly. He transforms himself physically to play Arthur, all those jerky movements, his gaunt appearance.
And the laughter. It's terrifying.
Oh, yeah. It goes from this nervous thing to this, explosion of madness. Like in that scene where he's practicing his stand-up routine and he just loses it. It's not funny. It's painful to watch.
Yeah.
And then you have those quieter moments where you can just see the rage building in his eyes like a volcano about to erupt.
You really believe he's going to snap.
Yeah, Phoenix doesn't hold back, but he also somehow makes you feel for this guy, even though he's doing terrible things.
It's a performance that stays with you. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do you think? What's the lasting impact of Joker?
It's a film that works on so many levels, like we've been saying. Character study, social commentary, thriller, and it's just beautifully shot.
It asks some tough questions about the world, about mental health, about what makes someone good or bad.
Right, but it doesn't give you easy answers, which I think is what makes it so good.
It sticks with you. It makes you think about your own biases, about things you might not want to think about.
And I think that's why people are still talking about it, why we're still analyzing it.
It challenges us to look deeper, to question things.
Exactly.
So that's Joker, a film that makes you rethink what it means to be a victim, a villain, sane, insane.
A film that makes you think about the choices we make and what leads us to them. It's a lot to process.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
We'll be back soon with another one, so keep an eye out.